Our first presenter today is Marisa Tangeman, whose pronouns are she, her, and she will be presenting on the role of popular culture and mainstream media discourses on bi+ identity construction. Marisa is a PhD candidate in sociology at the University of Cambridge, and her research investigates the role that contemporary popular culture discourses play in the construction of sexual identity among members of the bi+ community. She is interested in the ways popular culture and media representations uphold oppressive binary conceptions of sexual identity and how members of the bi+ community negotiate with these when doing identity work. So welcome, Marisa, and the floor is yours. And just a reminder to everyone who's not presenting, please keep yourself on mute. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
I will share my slides. Let's see if I can do that. Okay. All right. And can everybody see that? I'm just going to assume so. Go ahead. Okay. Great. So my name is Marisa. I am currently working on my PhD, and I'm just about to start my second year. So I've just kind of started my data collection process, and I'm just going to share some kind of preliminary findings and some things I found interesting so far. So my research looks at the role that popular culture and mainstream media play in bisexual identity construction. And yeah, I'll get started. So I was motivated to do this research because I was unable to really find any kind of like research conducted on specifically bisexual audiences. So the literature and research on bisexual media representations mostly focus on the representations themselves. And so I'm interested to see what bisexual people have to say about these representations. The discourse in the literature and research on bisexual media is often concerned with good and bad representations, but the perspectives of bisexual audiences are never included in that literature and research. So I'm conducting a sociological interview and focus group study with bisexual audiences in the UK to kind of try and fill that gap and find out what bisexual people have to say about pop culture representations. And I hope that this project can kind of broadly, obviously, help deconstruct binary ways of thinking about sexuality and allow bisexual people to articulate their identities and experiences in their own words. And so I just began my data collection process at the end of July. So I'm still kind of getting started with that, with my interviews. So far I've interviewed 17 people and I've conducted one focus group. So I'm still in that participant recruitment process, but I have done a bit of analysis now with those 17 interviews, and I can share with you some of what they said. But I'm approaching my methodology from a feminist perspective, which privileges voice and narrative and empowerment. And a few participants have said that their bisexuality was something that they're usually not comfortable discussing. And they found that the interviews were quite healing and empowering, which made me very happy. So I hope that the data collection process can be just as fruitful as kind of the end result when I disseminate my findings. And I hope that speaking about bisexuality with other bisexual people can help foster community. So when I asked my participants about their favorite bisexual celebrity or fictional character, almost none of them talked about explicitly bisexual people or characters, which I found very interesting. Instead, they mentioned people like Harry Styles, Jane Eyre, or the character Styles from Teen Wolf, if anyone is familiar. And I found that this is partly due to the general erasure and invisibility of bisexuality in popular culture, since most of my participants struggled to think of examples of any bisexual celebrities or popular characters. But I found it really interesting that my participants identified with these representations that aren't articulated as bisexual, But instead they kind of depict the feeling, for example, of being in between two identities or groups, feeling misunderstood, struggling to define oneself, playing around with gender, which are all bisexual experiences. So when faced with bisexual erasure in popular culture, bisexual audiences are reading in between the lines of heterosexual narratives and stories to find representations of their bisexual experiences. And one participant said that he doesn't even really enjoy media with explicit bisexual representation. And he said, "I'm less interested in culture that tells you what bisexuality is. I'm more interested in culture that gives you certain building blocks and then you interpret it in your own way." And just a side note, his favorite bisexual film is Fight Club. So because I'm interested in the experiences of bisexual audiences, I found it interesting that what my participants consider positive or negative representations didn't align with what many bisexual media critics would consider positive or negative. Many media critics would argue that a negative representation of bisexuality would depict a person as promiscuous, confused, indecisive, greedy, or evil. And I found that many of my participants actually found pleasure and identification in representations with these qualities. So for example, one participant described how she identifies with Megan Fox's character Jennifer in the film Jennifer's Body, a classic. And she said, "I guess Jennifer is kind of greedy. Like she goes around taking what she wants from anyone and getting kind of gratification and attention from whoever she wants. So I guess you could see that as greedy, but I actually don't. I just think it's really cool." But not all participants shared that sentiment, and a lot of my participants just had kind of varying answers to what negative representation looks like to them. So to describe negative representations, they used words like hypersexual, unfaithful, crazy, indecisive, heteronormative. A few of them talked about the homophobic bully trope. However, my participants, they frequently contradicted each other. And so far, there hasn't been kind of like one agreed upon negative or positive representation. They've all found bits of what they would consider positive or negative in all different things. So what kind of media representations do bisexual audiences want to see? So I asked my participants if they could create any bisexual mainstream media representation, what they would want to create. So a few participants said they'd want to make a bisexual reality TV show like Love Island. One participant said she wanted to see a show where all of the main characters are bisexual rather than just like one token bisexual in a friend group, which is very unrealistic, I would say. Another participant said they feel lonely and isolated in their experience coming to terms with their bisexuality, since they previously identified as a lesbian for a really long time and never saw any kind of representation of that experience. And then a few other participants wanted more representation of married bisexual people and bisexual people navigating their identity later in life. And then 3 of my participants are second-generation immigrants and all said that they would like to see more representation of how bisexual people navigate their identity when they feel unsafe coming out to some more traditional or conservative family members. So the large majority of my participants spoke about a lack of diversity in bisexual representation in popular culture, specifically in regards to the representations of people of color and working class people and trans and non-binary people. And most of the people of color interviewed so far said that they had never seen a bisexual representation in popular culture that they felt they identified with. So bisexual representation can come in many different forms, and my participants expressed the need for more variety in the bisexual narratives in media and pop culture. So they were less concerned with representations that might be considered negative and stereotypical, and more interested in seeing more diverse and different representations, even if that representation is promiscuous and greedy and a demon like Jennifer. So while there has been no one agreed upon negative or positive representation, every participant has said that no representation is always bad representation. So they all agreed that bisexual erasure is a very big problem. And one participant said, if I had been given the language to talk about bisexuality when I was younger, I think I would have been a lot happier. So we all know that bisexual people are at high risk suffering from poor mental health outcomes. And the inability to see ourselves represented is contributing to that. So while many media critics argue that good representation will have good effects and bad ones will have bad effects, my participants all felt that they were empowered and benefited from all different representations, leading me to believe that media effects are not as clear-cut as previous research in the field would argue. Popular culture representations of bisexuality do play a role in the identity construction of their audience, but it's not always straightforward. And one participant said that she finds it funny to see bisexuals stereotyped as greedy. And she said, "It's only been funny to me because to me, it's felt like I'm not greedy. I've just actually figured something out about the world, which is that you don't have to arbitrarily restrict yourself with regards to the people you form meaningful relationships with. I've never taken that very personally or felt particularly upset by that." The idea that bisexual representation can be bad or good implies that there is a right way to represent bisexuality and therefore a right way to be bisexual, which takes us back to previous points that it's problematic to conceptualize a good bisexual. So as bisexuals are deconstructing the heterosexual, homosexual binary, we're also deconstructing the binary of negative and positive media representations, and accepting that the identification process is just as complex as our very complex identities. My research shows that bisexual representations help give us the language to understand and articulate our identities, but we still need a lot more to work with and in all different flavors. So that is just a little snippet of what I have been kind of working on these past couple months of my interviews. And I am still only getting started and very excited about it. I'm still in the recruitment process for participants if anyone is interested. And I'm also eager to hear any comments or thoughts about my research, maybe any questions that you might want me to ask my participants. What you're wondering about, what bisexuals think about popular culture. But yeah, that is everything.
Thank you so much, Marisa. I have to admit, I'm a fan of Love Island, and I would love to see a bi-only cast of Love Island. That would be amazing reality TV.
Yeah.
There's one comment here talking about, I'll just read it. So critics of bisexual characters often seem to focus on a character's usefulness in educating non-bisexual people on bisexuality and presenting the community as worthy of respect or acceptance, rather than reflecting on the complicated and realistic experiences for the benefit or enjoyment for individual bisexual viewers. Speaking of Love Island, I actually think that happened on one of the seasons. So thanks for that comment, Bren. Any other questions for Marisa? Thanks, Marisa. And if you want to put your contact information in the chat, that would be great. So we'll move on now to our next presenter, Sara Schmieder, whose pronouns are they, she, presenting on how do we know you're actually bisexual, the function of illusionist and exclusionist ideologies on Tumblr. So Sara has been a regular Tumblr user since the age of 14 and has managed to turn her internet addiction into 2 different degrees. They graduated from the College of William and Mary in 2020 with a degree in anthropology and linguistics after writing a senior honors thesis on biphobia on Tumblr. In 2022, she graduated with a master's degree in anthropology and women's gender and sexuality studies from Brandeis University, continuing their research on bisexuality with a focus on Tumblr. She is currently working as a research associate at Harvard Business School and still spends way too much time on Tumblr every day. So welcome, Sara.
Hi. Can everyone hear me before I share my screen real quick?
Yep.
Perfect. Let's come on. And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Sorry, sometimes Zoom doesn't like it when I share my screen.
You're good.
Okay. So hi, I'm Sara, and this is the culmination of my undergraduate senior honors thesis from 2019 to 2020, and my master's thesis from 2020 to 2022, called How Do We Know You're Really Bisexual? The Function of Inclusionist and Exclusionist Ideologies on Tumblr. And just a quick content warning, I will be reading some biphobic Tumblr posts, so just heads up on that. When I was 14, I came out as bisexual and joined Tumblr in that exact order. At the time, Tumblr was pitched to me as a really progressive, really radical social media platform where all you really need is a username, an email, and a password, and you could join this group of queer people who are extremely accepting, extremely loving, and it's the best place for a person to be if they're queer. And for a few years, that seemed true. That felt like it was very much a major aspect of the platform, and that was very inclusive and very caring. And around the porn ban in 2019, something changed, and posts such as this one, which says, "As Pride season rolls around, let me remind fellow het-partnered bisexual people, Pride really isn't for you. So don't act like you deserve to be there as much as lesbians and gay men deserve to be there. Really just don't go at all, because there are no resources there that are for you. What are you proud of? Being in the relationship literally everyone expects you to be in and that introduces no actual oppression into your life? But at the very least, if you must go, and God knows hell nor high water will stop you, please, please, please don't bring your het partner." And posts like this started to pop up more and more with less pushback, less saying that's not true, and more of a, yeah, that's correct, this is how it should be, including posts such as, "If you are bisexual and willingly enter into a straight relationship, you are disowned from the queer community. You no longer matter. You are disgusting if you enter into a het relationship when you have the option not to. That is a fact." And what I realized over the years of these posts becoming more frequent and gaining less pushback is that there was this introduction of a binary logic between inclusion and exclusion. And identities that are not strictly straight or gay are put in the crosshairs of these ideologies. The best way to break this down is that inclusionists believe that as long as you are not exclusively cisgender, heteroromantic, and heterosexual, there is a place for you within the LGBTQ+ community. And bisexuals, regardless of their dating history, regardless of anything else, belong. And asexuals and aromantic people belong in the LGBTQ+ community if they want to be included. On the other end of the spectrum, exclusionists believe that even if one is not completely cisgender, heteroromantic, and heterosexual, that doesn't mean they belong. And bisexuals in same-sex relationships have more stake in the game, more rights to LGBTQ+ community and resources than those in opposite sex relationships. And asexual and aromantic people don't inherently belong. So through the rise of this binary ideology, my research basically argues that exclusionist rhetoric has shifted queer Tumblr spaces from a place of solidarity, camaraderie, and liberation to a place of distrust, where one has to show up and be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they belong, and that they are queer enough to belong, and that they will abide by whatever is needed for their queerness to allow them to stay. And that this need for proving belonging and adhering to this binary and adhering to this hierarchy really emphasizes or reinforces trans-exclusionary radical feminist ideas and white supremacist ideas, where one is tainted by how close they are to heterosexuality, to maleness, and how purity is really what is being, what people are striving for, what they're looking for. So the crux of a lot of this, and the crux of a lot of my research, is how these discussions happening on Tumblr are really just like a microcosm of reinforcing biphobia. And this is done through phallocentrism, where the belief is that bisexual women are all attracted to men, would rather be with a man than anyone else. And bi men are inherently gay. They just haven't come out yet. They just don't realize it yet. And that bisexuality is just a stepping stone. And if you're bisexual, you really just need to analyze if your attraction is genuine, if it's pure, or if you're doing it for attention because you're greedy and slutty and promiscuous and falling into this bisexual chic idea. So through that, it's really a positioning of bisexuals as Trojan horses within queer spaces to allow cishet invaders in. So by questioning bisexual people on their attraction and on their legitimacy, it's a way to vet out the fakers, which makes the space less of somewhere that you can go to find community, and more of a place where you have to go and making sure that you can like prove to others, prove to strangers on the internet that you belong, that you deserve to be there. And my research really focuses on what is being said in these posts and less what the poster believes, because for many people, going to Tumblr is I don't know who these people are, I just like their blog situation. You don't inherently know who's on the other side of the screen if they're being truthful about who they are. But a lot of this ends up bringing back this idea of, if you're going into a space and being told you don't belong, would you really want to be there? And that causes worse outcomes overall for bisexual people by pushing them back into the closet as a group that is already the least likely to come out, saying that they're taking away resources from people who actually need them for a group that has higher domestic violence and worse mental health outcomes than other LGBTQ plus identities. And also within all of this, there's just an erasure of the diversity within the bi plus community, where we are ignoring the existence of trans bisexual people, non-white bisexual people, because a lot of this ends up focusing on where identities intersect and how the intersection isn't a real intersection, or it's not a valid intersection. And by doing so, what is happening is that bisexuality is seen as a bad thing. It's seen as something that you don't want to be, and it's seen as something you have to feel sorry for. And that bisexuality is something that you just don't want, that isn't desired in the space, it isn't promoted. So through all of this that I've found, I've basically concluded that what happens with exclusionist rhetoric is that it's meant to reinforce biphobic ideologies and push transphobic rhetorics of any association with maleness is bad, and reinforce very, very rigid categorizations that don't necessarily encompass all of the experiences or any of the actual experiences that bisexual people go through. So in conclusion, biphobia on Tumblr upholds rigid categorization with this idea of protecting queer communities and resources, yet drives out bisexual people who have helped form those communities through focusing more on questioning the legitimacy of others and less on solidarity, where this normalization of biphobia pushes people further into the closet and further away from LGBTQ plus communities, both online and offline, by creating a bar of entry that relies solely on proving legitimacy and purity of one's sexuality and one's lived experiences to strangers on Tumblr, which personally, I don't think I had to prove anything about myself to strangers on Tumblr. So thank you.
Wow, thank you, Sarah. Really, really interesting work. Do we have any questions for Sarah? So a comment from Gabrielle. What do you think it is about Tumblr specifically?
I think part of what it is specifically about Tumblr is its pseudonymous nature, because I feel like the lack of needing to show your face or needing to fill out any information about yourself can make people feel empowered to say whatever they want. And I see like these same conversations happening over again, like repetitively, also on like TikTok and Twitter. But on TikTok, you have to show your face. And on Twitter, there seems to be more of a culture of like saying who you are. Meanwhile, at least on early Tumblr, there's a lot of using pseudonyms or like not putting your age in your bio and just going by your username. And that lack of like ability to have true accountability will just let people say whatever they want, and they don't feel like they're going to have any repercussions from it, or that it will actually affect people, because they don't think about the people on the other side of the screen. It's just, this is how I feel and I need to get it out there.
Yeah, I have this conversation quite often, the double-edged sword of, social media. Obviously, it's great for a lot of things, but certainly that particular thing, the anonymity and, feeling no accountability to what you say is a very, I'll say, a dark side. So Bren has a question. Do you have thoughts on, one, how this is shaping younger generation's relationship with bisexual identity? And two, what could be done to better serve younger generations with online bi resources to help combat these harmful messages?
Yeah. So what I've noticed a lot, at least more recently, and this isn't fully fleshed out, but that there's a movement away from bisexuality, of not wanting to claim that label because of the negative connotations and the negative stereotypes based on it, or people being like, I'm bi, but like not really, like just in theory, like technically, but that doesn't matter. Or like very much dismissing it as being like, I mean, yeah, but we all know that bisexual people are all privileged, and I'm not like those bisexuals. Very much a othering from it. And I think that partially with these harmful messages online is a big thing is just like acknowledging that they're harmful, and acknowledging that it's biphobic and that it hurts, and that it isn't just an online phenomenon. Because a lot of how people conceptualize the internet is, well, it happened on Tumblr, it's not really hurting anyone. Like, this doesn't have any offline impacts, or if you get out into the real world. But if you're getting out into the real world, already seeing these things being talked about on Tumblr, your experience with offline queer communities is going to be a lot different than if you never saw those harmful messages to begin with. So I don't know there's a way to necessarily like stop them, besides educating people on biphobia and sort of combating these harmful ideas and harmful stereotypes, while also not demonizing other people in the LGBTQ plus community, because it's not that only one group can be liberated, it's that everyone has to be. So yeah, but I think the main thing is just like acknowledging that it's harmful and it causes damage and it hurts.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of great comments in the chat. This is a particularly interesting comment from John. I've been hearing a lot more about elitism, one of the good ones recently, in both bi and trans worlds. It's really interesting to think about in relation to what you're saying. Okay, thank you so much, Sarah. This was a really interesting talk. So next up, we will go over to, bear with me for one moment, I've changed the order of things. Shiro Takeuchi and Carla Bessa will be speaking about bisexualities between fictional films and Latin American spectatoralities. Forgive me, I've been up since 2:30 a.m. Shiro is a BA in social sciences from State University of Campinas in Brazil. They participate on the Amazonian group of studies on bisexuality and researched on bisexual representation on Latin American cinema for over a year with a national scholarship. So welcome, Shiro.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen as well. So, I'm here to talk about this research I did on my undergrad, which is about cinema, bisexuality and cinema in Latin America. And the three films I'm going to talk about are here. And Your Mother 2, released in 2001 in Mexico and directed by Alfonso Cuarón. On Death Row, released in 2009 in Peru and directed by Javier Fuentes Leon, and Artificial Paradises, released in 2012 in Brazil, directed by Marcos Pena. This research had 4 main parts, which were bibliographic analysis, film analysis, interviews, and the making of something like a thick description, to use Clifford Gertz's words. He's an anthropologist. Meaning that mixing theory, films, and the interviews, I interpreted what was more relevant to the meanings of what was being said in these discourses, the films, the interviews, and the bibliography, in order to understand possible meanings of film narratives and how they were perceived by the agents I interviewed, all bisexual identified people from different parts of the country. Some of my findings are similar to Marisa, so maybe I'll repeat some of the things she said. Well, for a little introduction, there are, as you said, many film narratives about characters that may be perceived as LGBTQ+, like troublemakers or deservers of tragic endings. And for bi+ characters specifically, there are also some frequent narratives like perverse and deceive people, or people who are there for others to experiment on their sexuality. But that thing, again, that Marisa said, the division between good and bad characters and the stereotypes as bad, also as Shady Eisner points, that some stereotypes are not necessarily bad because some people in real life out of the screen identify with them, and well, you can't say they're bad people for it. But as Richard Dyer indicates, he's a cinema professor in the UK, stereotypes are a way of indicating who is in or who is out of a community. And what I found out in the bibliographic analysis were some causes and effects of biphobia in social life, which were perceived also during film analysis. And some also were pointed out in the interviews by the agents I interviewed. Well, some of the stereotypes bothered them, such as the narrative of a cheating bisexual in Underthrow, but also one of them pointed out that it was nice how the plot was twisted in a way in this film. And other stereotypes like the use of drugs bothered them and did not bother them at the same time, usually because of context, especially in Artificial Paradises, which is a film that happens basically during a party on the beach. And use of drugs is very frequent there. And it is also a place, it was also the film that naturalized bisexuality the most, the people I interviewed said. But the main cause of disappointment with the movies were their constructions, the scripts, and how the stories were told, which the agents I interviewed described as boring, made of pieces that did not fit together, and stuff like that. One of the causes of this rejection was, I believe, due to the fact that only 2 out of the 3 agents I talked to liked drama, 2 out of 5 liked drama or slices of life movies. The other people usually preferred documentaries or sci-fi or other kinds of fantasy films. And all the 3 films I studied here are drama, and they were selected by popularity, analyzing 3 film social medias, which were Letterboxd, Filmo, which is a Brazilian letterbox, so to speak, and IMDb. And because of this rejection, it was hard for most people to empathize with the characters. And identification occurred only in some particular situations. For example, in And Your Mother Too, in this scene, this woman standing, she had just put some music on at the bar, and she was taking those two boys to dance. And one of the bisexuals I talked to, he said he'd been there. He felt like he'd been there at the bar with some music on, with his friends, etc. And that felt really close to home to him. And or because the story was very touching, like an underthrow, the plot twist, about the cheating bisexual was also very touching, as some people described it. Well, that's that. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, how do I stop sharing my screen?
Thank you so much, Shiro. Jill commented on this in the chat as well, but absolutely beautiful presentation, and a lot of parallels with some of the other work that we've heard today, which is really interesting to see. Do we have any questions for Shiro before we move on? Okay, so bear with me for a moment. Our next speaker is Jill, and Jill has submitted a video. So Jill Friedenberg, her presentation is called BIWIFEENERGY, the Semiotics of Sexual Fluidity on TikTok. Jill is a doctoral student in the Communications and Film program at Memphis, and her research areas include media's effect on identity formation, documentary filmmaking methods, algorithmic biases, and queer and feminist technocultures. Jill is actually here with us today, but may not have the most stable of internet connection, which is why she sent the video over. So I'm going to share that. Okay, can everyone see the video? Okay, here we go.
Yes, BIWIFEENERGY, the Semiotics of Sexual Fluidity on TikTok. And just so everyone is aware, I want us all to have baseline knowledge, right? When I say BIWIFEENERGY, I'm referring to bisexuality, and there are many different ways that people talk about bisexuality, but I go with the definition of someone who's attracted to all genders. So gender doesn't make a difference in whether or not someone is attracted to someone else, not necessarily heterosexual or homosexual or anything like that, but bi as in open. And I am so excited to share this with you all because this is sort of a fun passion project of mine. I didn't do this for any classes. This was just personal research. So just to set everyone up for success again, semiotics is the main theory that I use to look at these TikToks. And it's the study of how words and other symbolic systems of communication make meaning, how humans form meaning together collaboratively. And I specifically was looking at symbols, and these, according to Peirce's model of semiotics, have an arbitrary relationship to what they represent. So the only reason why we view this thing as connected to its meaning is because we as people decided that. The example that I always give my undergrads is how money didn't really mean anything until we decided that it meant something. And so I specifically took this idea of the symbol and I looked at TikTok's huge trend that took off in 2021 that was a BIWIFEENERGY trend. And I was curious about what these symbols mean, how we're constructing bisexuality through these symbols. What does that mean for technocultural research? At this point, it seems like a lot of these digital influences are actually helping us construct meaning that impact broader versions of gender and sexuality.
Well, to be honest, I'm a hetero guy, but I really try to be a good ally, and it ain't no secret, let me tell you why. It's because I love my wife, and my wife is bi. BIWIFEENERGY. Yes, BIWIFEENERGY. BIWIFEENERGY. Yeah, yes, BIWIFEENERGY. Now, sometimes people assume I'm queer, and I have to say, hey, just a straight guy here, but I get it a lot. And I don't mean to be cruel, it's just that my wife is a bisexual. BIWIFEENERGY. Yes, BIWIFE energy. BIWIFE energy. Yeah. Yes, BIWIFE energy.
I don't want to necessarily the whole thing, but I can send this video to anyone who's interested. You can see it's so goofy. It's kind of ridiculous. It's humorous, but it took off. So this person posted this video, and then as of today, because I went ahead and double checked this morning, the hashtag BIWIFEENERGY, which it came from that song, has over 195.2 million views and over 9,000 user generated videos. So over 9,000 different people or similar people posting multiple videos, right? But that's a lot of content generation coming out of this one idea of someone having BIWIFEENERGY. And what's really interesting to me too is when I talk to people about it, or when I go into the comment sections under these TikToks, no one really knows what BIWIFEENERGY is, but when you see it, you recognize it. And so I thought that there was something in that. Most of the content that gets posted, so in these 9,000 videos, most of the content is about people's relationships. So the most popular one, which I'm going to show you, is just a series of clips of this very lovely looking man who's just enjoying his life. And it's assumed that his wife put together this content about him. And so the lenses that I used for this whole project are, again, semiotics, but I also was looking at it through a queer theory lens. And then the actual analysis that I did was through visual content. And I plan to extend the project and actually go in and analyze the comments as well. But here are two more videos that sort of, I'm hoping will give you all this air of how it's a vibe and it's an energy, but it's a compliment. Right? Like, this is a good thing. And people are just creating this online.
BIWIFEENERGY video that I made went a lot farther than I thought it was going to. So a couple things to clarify. One, I didn't come up with that term. Someone else wrote a really fun song. It's in the sound. Click it if you haven't heard it. It's hilarious. Two, I did talk to two of my exes. One was like, yeah, this lands. Another one took it as a compliment, was like, I hope I give off that energy. And I was like, this is amazing. I want to clarify. A lot of people in the comments are saying what about bi and pan men? Like, do they count? No, it's about straight men. Like, the whole point is that the man is straight and is married to a bisexual woman. His energy, the vibes and his deal it's a specific kind of straight guy, you know? Obviously queer men also give that off, but it's more obvious when they're already queer. It makes more sense, you know?
Okay. So that is the closest video that I was able to find of someone attempting to explain what this is when it's so hugely popular. And most of the videos are very similar to this next one. And this is the most popular video underneath this audio.
Well, to be honest, I'm a hetero guy, but I really try to be a good ally, and it ain't no secret, let me tell you why. It's because I love my wife, and my wife is bi. BIWIFEENERGY. Yes, BIWIFEENERGY. BIWIFEENERGY. Yeah.
So on the surface, it's just a guy living his life, having fun, but I think what creates BIWIFEENERGY and what I've found through my analyses is this idea of allyship, right? So the assumption is that all of these men who have content posted about them are married to a woman who identifies as either bi or pansexual, so attracted to all genders. On top of that, there's this implication that they are rejecting misogyny, and gender roles in general. There's a willingness to be vulnerable, like that man that was dancing around in his underwear being goofy, right? I think BIWIFEENERGY speaks to broader ideas about gender performance, and the reason why women, and I want to look at this more closely through the idea of the female gaze, but the idea that the women are so attracted to this idea of BIWIFEENERGY is just that we're attracted to men that reject hypermasculine behavior, and are willing to be vulnerable and open themselves up to these things, and can be shamelessly effeminate and not worry about the way that they're going to be perceived by the people around them. So some of the content that gets generated is not just these different clips of a man having a good time, being cutesy, any of that stuff. Some of it is actually more of a mechanism for women to come out on TikTok. So a lot of women will have very few clips of their husband, and then the second half of the song is just looking cute, feeling themselves, you know, like coming across as very attractive, to do really analyze closely on the men in question. But what's also interesting is there have been multiple videos, those that are the least popular, video clips where their husband is performing very masculine things, like chugging a beer or climbing, like, I don't know, I don't think rock climbing is gendered necessarily, but, you know, doing things that make them come across as very athletic or manly. And then they focus on themselves. And in the comments, people are like, you're missing the mark. This is not what BIWIFE energy is. So there's an audience understanding of what this is, but actually connecting the symbols and listing them and figuring out what they are is the broad spans of this project, the goal. But I think a lot of it is just that idea of a cis hetero man married to a woman who identifies as bisexual, who is very proud of her for being out and proud in the community, and also does not take that as a reason to be defensive or a need to sort of be hyper masculine. And I think the implications of this kind of study, because this is my first foray into the way that people start to actually construct new identities digitally, and through digitally mediated cultures, is recognizing the impact of educational and all these prospects of user sharing platforms for underrepresented groups, because a lot of folks who identify as bisexual are very quiet about it, because the idea is that you can choose then. So why would you not just choose to be straight? It's a whole thing. That's a whole other presentation. But thinking about this, especially when it gets so popular, like millions and millions of people are engaging with this content, we need to start looking at this, and we need to actually start queering the research and understanding how people are constructing their own personal identities and coming to accept other people's gender and sexual identities via this goofy, fun stuff. These things that users generate online actually have an impact in real life. And so looking at that, I think, is an exciting and a fun way to do some additional research.
Thank you, Jill. That was a really interesting presentation, and I'm probably going to have that BIWIFE energy song stuck in my head for at least a week. Do we have any questions for the audience for Jill? One question I have, and I know that you responded to a similar thought in the chat. So, you know, this idea that perhaps, you know, someone might be using these types of videos to signal some sort of queer by proxy. I wonder if you, you know, came across any videos that basically, you know, showed this BIWIFE energy as a mechanism to boost masculinity. Like, I'm thinking that, you know, bisexuals are hypersexualized and fetishized. And I'm wondering if any of the videos that you came across were kind of using those stereotypes as a way to, you know, signal, you know, a masculine sexuality, but yeah.
That's a great question. And I'm so sorry I'm not on camera. Like I said, I've been kicked off the Wi-Fi a couple times, so I'm just trying to limit the number of things that could cause a problem. But what's interesting is, so when you go through the sound and you watch all of these videos, and I don't expect anyone to go and watch all 9,000 plus that there are now, but there are some that are seemingly just showing off a stereotypically hot man partner person, lifting weights, chugging beers, all of these things that I think are typically coded as hypermasculine. And so there are people creating content like that. But then when you go into the comments, what I'm really interested in is the way that commenters will reject that. They'll say, no, this doesn't count as bi-wife energy. Like just you being bi, because it's always or not always, but for the most part, it's the presumably bi women, mostly cis women creating this content. And so there is this communal understanding of what a man with bi-wife energy is, and it is counter to these more hypermasculine ideas. And another interesting thing too, and this idea of queerness by proxy, I think it's important to note, and I put this in the chat, but I did not come across any videos where it was some guy making this about himself. It's always sort of a endearing term placed on them by either their direct partner or their partner's group of friends that are sort of accepting them. I don't think, at least nothing I have come across gives me the thought that cis straight men themselves are trying to infiltrate our community via this trend. I think it's just a celebration of, and maybe comes out of a little bit of a defensiveness from bisexual cis women needing to say, well, I'm with a straight cis man, but he's not like other straight cis men, you know. And I think this is attached to the other presentations in that there is a defensiveness that comes out of being perceptively or visibly in a heterosexual relationship. So continuing the conversation, I think, is hugely important because it comes out of a little bit of defensiveness, but also a lot of joy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. A really important question here from John is, do you think that bi husband energy would also be a thing? And is there enough of a difference for there to be a thing?
I want it to be a thing so badly. I would be so interested in what that would look like. And I did another presentation recently on bi pirate TikTok, and there were more men or perceptive people who seemed to be men. Not everyone on TikTok puts their pronouns in there, so forgive my lack of knowledge on that front, but there were a lot more men participating in that trend, or masculine presenting people participating in that trend than in this one, likely because of that audio. So I would be interested in what that would look like. I have not seen it yet. An interesting thing that did happen, however, was that some women or feminine presenting folks were using the audio to just post pictures of themselves, which was also interesting. And then when you would go into the comments of those videos, it would just be people saying, this isn't really supposed to be about you either. So it's all about this communal construction of what bi-wife energy is and who it's actually supposed to apply to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another comment in the chat. I'm not sure if you can see it, Jill, but I wonder if there's less bi husband energy on social because bi men are less represented in media in general.
Definitely. I think it, and I also, in addition to that, think that women who are performing more masculine behaviors are more societally accepted than men who are presenting more effeminate behaviors. So all of these things speak to larger social questions, and we should be pushing back and questioning why these things aren't more popular on the other side of the gender spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one common theme across all of the presentations today, is to really be critical about the media that we're consuming in general, but specifically, what are the messages hidden behind the images, behind the videos, the movies? What are they telling us about bisexuality? So if there are no other questions for any of our presenters, we will close a few minutes early to give everyone a quick break before our next keynote. So a big thank you to Marisa, Jill, Shiro, and Sarah for your wonderful presentations. Thank you all.